I know we're actually 5 minutes past, so if you're okay, I think we can even get the ball rolling now. People can still keep on sending out your locations. We'd love to see where you're dialing in from.
Oh yeah, well, welcome everyone. It's a nice Monday evening for some of you, morning for those of you in Asia. This is Albert's List webinar on LinkedIn tips for the healthcare industry. This is the wonderful Gabby and Lisa, and they're both career coaches that work very hard in the industry with ResMarket. I can never pronounce that. I think it's missing a vowel.
It's like resume market, but then market just doesn't have any vowels.
Okay, resume market. I tried. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed what they have to teach us, and I'm passing it over to Gabby now.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. We're super excited to have you. As Colin mentioned, we've got our wonderful Lisa here today, which is extra fun because Lisa and I actually go way back to our high school days, which is always lovely. And again, a great tip for your own personal networking that you never know who in your network might come into your life at relevant points in time and find these connections. So really excited to chat with you.
Actually, Gabby.
Oh my God, you're right. It is middle school. I don't know why I said, yeah, it's true. We played on the soccer team together. Lisa was really good and I was really bad. But other skill sets came into play and that's what matters. Cool, if we can head to the next slide. So yeah, to tell you a little bit about myself. So I am not a ResMarket advisor actually, but I am the COO and co-founder of ResMarket. And what ResMarket is we are a career services marketplace. And we have advisors like Lisa who specialize in different industries and backgrounds and experiences, and they all offer one-on-one career coaching at an affordable price. So typically you'll see sessions like this come around like $300+. Really pride ourselves on being accessible and offering these services to job seekers in bite-sized chunks where you get value out of those sessions and you get it from people who know what they're talking about, who've been in the field, who know what's like interesting and what's important in that specific industry. And we try to offer it around the $40 to $70 range. So we can head to the next slide. We offer 5 different service types. So we've got our career pathing, right? That's more career discovery, resume reviews, cover letter support, interview prep, and also LinkedIn revisions, which is very relevant for our session today. Go. And how you use our site. So our website is ResMarket, no vowels in the market, as Colin has terribly been suffering with. But you can go in, you can select a session type that you're interested in, add it to your cart, purchase your session, and then we'll be able to schedule that session with you and your advisor. And just to, again, touch upon our mission, we really believe that career coaching should be accessible and help open up doors to interesting opportunities and industries for our job seekers. And we see our little zebra logo in the corner, that sometimes you just need to learn how to show off your stripes because you've already done the hard part of earning them. So if we're able to help you figure out what job works with your lifestyle, maybe it's in healthcare, maybe you learned today that you don't want a job in healthcare. I think all of those things are reasonable and exciting, and we're happy to be here to help you land that next position. And we've got a special promo for you, which we'll bring this slide back towards the end, but wanted to share with you that we are offering a 10% discount for all of our healthcare advisors, right? Really highlighting our industry specialization. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat to our healthcare code. You could also just put in healthcare at checkout. It'll go on until the end of June. But if you click on that link, you'd be able to then see the advisors automatically be applied at checkout. You'll be able to get that benefit to you. Awesome. So now, actually, I have a question for Lisa, right? So Lisa is one of our stellar advisors. And Lisa, I'd love to hear from you what somebody could expect in a res market session.
Great question, Gabby. And I'll start by talking a little bit about my resume review session, because that is definitely the most popular one that I've done through ResMarket so far. So with a resume review session, well, with any session, actually, there's a pre-session form that you'll fill out and give us a little bit of information about why you're interested in signing up for a ResMarket session and what some of your goals for the session are. So even before we meet, I will have that information about you, and I'll be able to get to know you a little bit just through your answers to that questionnaire. I will also probably have some questions of my own based on your responses to that questionnaire. So usually when we start a session, that's what I like to start with. I like to ask you some questions about your goals that you provided, about what you're really hoping to get out of the time that we have together, and what you're really hoping to kind of walk away from the session with. I really like to keep my sessions casual and conversational, so it will be a lot of back and forth. It should not be intimidating or scary in any way, really just meant to benefit you and help you work towards your professional goals, whatever those might be. And specifically in a resume session, my goal as the advisor is to try to get to know you and your experiences as best as I possibly can, so that I can in turn go ahead and give you some advice on how to articulate them in a way that's going to be really, really applicable or enticing to employers. So just like Gabby said earlier, you want to show off your stripes. That is my job. That is what I am here to do. So that's typically how it goes in a resume review session. And then I take a ton of notes, and I will turn those notes into an updated resume draft for you that you can review, you can keep, you can throw out, you can do whatever you want with, but just some suggestions based on our conversation. Also think that I should mention LinkedIn a little bit today, since that's going to be our topic of our presentation.
Absolutely.
So when I do a LinkedIn session, it's pretty similar to start out, in the sense that I will ask you some questions after reviewing your pre-session form. But rather than going through the different sections of a resume with you, I'll go through the different sections of LinkedIn and talk about kind of their different purposes with you, as well as physically walk you through, which buttons to click on, how to update different sections, etc. Because one of the not necessarily challenges, but differences with LinkedIn is that you're the only person that can update your profile. So in that sense, I am giving you every tool that you could possibly need to make those really strong updates after our session is over.
That sounds great. I know that I sometimes look at my LinkedIn and think, hey, I can use this refresh as well. And I think too, it's like really helpful to have the perspective of somebody who's an outsider who's seen so many of these things, and can really get to the point of like, hey, what do I notice when I see this? And how can you make it so that what you notice is the message that I'm trying to then send out into the world as well? That is very cool. And awesome. And Lisa too, I know we spoke a little bit about this, but the reason why you decided to do this LinkedIn session, right? Why is LinkedIn something that is special to you?
Yeah, another really good question, Gabby. And my high level answer is that I think LinkedIn is really underrated. I think that LinkedIn has a reputation for being a resource that people can use to network, and networking can be really scary. And if you think that that's kind of like the only reason why you would need to be on LinkedIn, you might not want to be on LinkedIn or engage in it in a really meaningful way. But I think that LinkedIn has so many other features. It's such a powerful resource. And in particular, it's a really good research tool. So if you are trying to break into a new industry or learn about a new industry, it can be an instrumental step in helping you make that happen. So that's what I'm hoping to talk more about today. And I hope is one of all of our attendees' major takeaways from our session.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for answering my questions. I'll hand the stage over to you so we can get started and dig into those great tips.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, both Gabby and Colin, for having me here today. I actually, while I'm introducing myself, would love to get to know the audience as well. So right now you'll see 2 questions on the slide on the screen, and I would love if everyone could go ahead and answer those for us in the chat. So question 1, do you currently have a LinkedIn profile? Yes or no? And then question 2, how would you rate your knowledge of LinkedIn on a scale from 1 beginner to 5 expert? And Gabby's going to be my chat monitor today and is going to go ahead and and keep track of those responses in the chat. But while you are typing in those responses, as mentioned, my name is Lisa. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a career coach. That's what I do professionally and on the side as well. I have been career coaching for a little over 8 years now. And during those 8 years, I have developed a couple of specialties, one of which is in healthcare, which is why healthcare is our focus for today. In terms of my background and credentials, I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, a master's degree in higher education administration, and I am a board certified career coach through the Center for Credentialing and Education. So lots of different educational experiences related to the field. And I would call myself a super LinkedIn fan. So I am very excited to dive into LinkedIn today. So Gabby, what are our responses in the chat looking like?
It seems like we have mostly yeses with one or two no's, which again, you've come to the right place. After this, we hope you feel motivated to make your LinkedIn profile. And we're getting a lot of 2s and 3s. I'd say like 3 average for people's comfort. We do have a few experts here, at least 2, which is very exciting. And also says some 1s, people who are ready to get their feet wet.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for that summary, Gabby. So it does seem like we have quite a variety in the audience. So I hope that for those of you who are on more of the 1 or 2 side of the spectrum of your knowledge of LinkedIn, you learn a lot today. And for those of you who are on the 4 and 5, maybe you learn a few things. Or if you know something that I don't know or that I don't cover, please feel free to throw that in the chat and help your fellow attendees as well. Love the community aspect of these webinars in the sense that, we can all be teachers in different pieces of it. So great, that's really helpful for me as I move into my content. So this next slide is actually going to be a little bit of a quiz for you who say you're experts and learning experience for those of you who are maybe newer to LinkedIn. But I think it's important to go over some data about LinkedIn because I often get the question of how important is it for me to really have a LinkedIn profile and be active on it? And I think that this data really emphasizes my answer to that question, which is it's super important. So once again, if you can throw your answers in the chat, Gabby will take a look at those and summarize for me. But if you had to guess, as of 2022, how many users are on LinkedIn? So this is going to be a number. If you think about it, LinkedIn is a global platform, so keep that in mind. It's not just in the country that you are in personally. With the rise of virtual networking in the past couple of years because of the pandemic, we've seen LinkedIn grow quite a bit. So what are we seeing, Gabby?
All right, we're seeing, and I'm also trying to think about this answer myself, but we're getting some like 10 to 15 range, and then we're also hitting the 100 million range. So we're getting some magnitudes of difference out here.
Okay.
But I kind of agree. I feel like, I'm stuck either between the like 10 million or 100 million, and they both feel like a lot.
They do feel like a lot. And shockingly, the answer is actually far, far greater than all of those guesses.
Oh my God. Whoa.
Yeah. As of, I think yesterday was the last time I updated this stat. If you go to the LinkedIn homepage and you read their kind of like about section, there are over 830 million users on LinkedIn. So when we talk about the importance of LinkedIn, it's where everybody is. You got to be on LinkedIn to be part of this global virtual community. And fun fact, LinkedIn is actually the fastest growing social media platform in the past like 10-ish years. Second is Twitter, to give you a little bit of context, but LinkedIn has grown 2.5 times faster than Twitter has in the past 10 years. So LinkedIn is huge. That's the takeaway here.
Fascinating. Ooh, yes. That is interesting. Somebody asked a follow-up of how many people are active on LinkedIn.
That's a really good question and is something that I have looked into personally, but it's really hard to answer because of the vague definition of what it means to be active. So, you know, if active means like logging in once a month, if active means posting once a month, like there are so many definitions of that word. So I don't have a number for you right now. I would say it's definitely less than 830 million. But I don't know for sure. And I agree with you that LinkedIn will probably not post those stats because they might not want people to know. So fair question.
Yep. But at least a decent
okay.
I'd assume.
Yeah. Oh yeah. LinkedIn is buzzing at any time of day. Speaking of which, that is a good segue into the second question. What percentage of recruiters are on LinkedIn looking for job candidates? So I'm looking for a percentage here in the chat. And just to kind of clarify, if you thought of like all the recruiters out there in the world, what percentage of them are using LinkedIn as one of like their main sources to look for job candidates when they have a position that they're looking to fill?
All right, we're getting some like a good range. We got a 60, 70, an 80, and a 90.
Okay. Well, the answers in that order are definitely working up towards the correct answer, but once again, not quite as high as it should be. So the correct answer is actually 95%. And this stat comes from a Forbes article that was published earlier this year that says truly 95% of recruiters across every industry, you know, no matter what level position, whether it's entry level, senior level, or mid level, 95% of recruiters are looking on LinkedIn. So another reason why you want to have a LinkedIn presence is that you can certainly find a job without it, but if you want to be in that pool that recruiters are turning to find candidates, LinkedIn is where that's happening.
Makes sense.
All right, so then taking things one step further towards today's topic, which is healthcare, how many healthcare practitioners are on LinkedIn? So we know the number of total users is 830 million. But if we ask the question of, you know, how many of those people are within healthcare, you know, is it worth it if I'm looking to break into healthcare for me to be on LinkedIn? What do we think that number looks like?
All right, we got some 83 million, 2 million as some guesses.
Okay.
All right, we got like 50 to 75%. So that's probably around 400,000.
Okay.
5 million out here.
So another variety. So the answer for this one is actually 8.6 million. So definitely as much on target or the most on target question so far of the three so far in this brief quiz. So definitely, you know, a smaller portion of the 830 million. I would say that healthcare is certainly not like the largest industry that's on LinkedIn, but still, if you are looking to connect with 8.6 million possible colleagues, LinkedIn is still a really good tool for that to be a possibility. So still definitely worth it in that respect. And also one caveat that I will mention here is that this is another stat that comes directly from LinkedIn, and it's based on what industry each user like lists on their profile. So if somebody, for example, was a product manager at a healthcare organization, they could list product management as their industry. So it's not like a 100% accurate statistic, but I think it's still some helpful perspective.
Absolutely. All
right. And then last sort of trivia question, how many healthcare related jobs are on LinkedIn? So as you probably know, LinkedIn can be used to find like open job postings and submit applications. And so this question is like at any given point in time, what is the number of open jobs that are posted on LinkedIn? Any thoughts on this one? I think this is probably the toughest one.
Not yet. Yeah, this one's a little bit harder. I feel like at least 2 million. Oh, we got a 15 million up here.
Okay, 2 million, 15 million.
100,000.
100,000. Okay. Well, this number is probably one that might be a little bit lower than what you were thinking. So the stat is 1,066,000. But you know, if you are looking for one job, I think that's pretty good odds. Finding one of the 1,066,000 that might be a good fit for you. And another sort of portion of this stat that I was able to find is that there are about 22,000 new healthcare jobs posted every month. So if your you know, job search is spanning a couple of months, or you're looking maybe more passively to find something over time, just know that there's always going to be like thousands of new opportunities for you to explore. So I hope that your takeaway from this slide is that LinkedIn is a huge resource. There are so many people on it. There are so many opportunities for you to connect, whether it's with people or jobs, and that you're excited to kind of go through the rest of today's chat about how to actually do all of that.
Absolutely. I know I am.
Awesome. Thanks, Gabby. And I didn't mention this earlier, but if anyone has questions throughout the presentation, feel free to throw them in the chat even now. You know, we will have time for questions at the end, but I will definitely monitor it as best as I can. And I did see that we had a question about whether or not we were going to cover biotech and pharmaceutical industries today. And the answer is yes. I have pulled a bunch of examples from many different types of, or many different facets of the healthcare industry. But if anybody has any more hyper-specific questions about like a certain industry, feel free to throw those in the chat and I can address those as well. All right. So the way that I've structured our chat today is by going through 3 different, what I would call main reasons to use LinkedIn. And we're going to talk through each of these individually. So number 1, having a strong online presence. I don't know about you, but if before I had a LinkedIn profile, when I Googled my name, really weird stuff came up. The top result actually was my high school track records, which probably will make Gabby laugh because we were on the track team together. And I was thinking to myself, is that what I would want a recruiter to see first thing if they were Googling my name? And the answer was no. So that was one of the motivating factors for me to build a LinkedIn profile. This could also be true, like if you have a Twitter account, an Instagram account, or any other social media accounts that have your name attached to them, those might come up as like some of your top listings on Google. And that could be fine if that's something that you're okay with, but also having LinkedIn there and presenting like that professional, you know, persona is something that can really benefit you when it comes to networking in the job search. So that's number 1. Number 2 is research. And this is my favorite part of LinkedIn. There are so many different ways that you can research, and I'm going to talk through 4 today, but also happy to answer questions about more of them when we get to this section. And then number 3 is that networking piece. So building, but also keeping track of your network. Because, you know, you can network out in real life, like not virtually, and meet a ton of people. But the nice thing about LinkedIn is it's a place to house all of that. So you can remember, you know, oh yeah, there was this person named Gabby that I knew in middle school who all of a sudden now like launched a company that I might be interested in being involved with. I may not have remembered that if it was only in my brain and not, you know, in my LinkedIn profile. Gabby's an exception, of course. But maybe somebody else from my middle school class that might be true with. So keeping track of your network is definitely a really big benefit. Gabby, I'm curious, which of these 3 do you find yourself using LinkedIn like for the most often?
I think 2 and 3, definitely. You know, just like seeing what companies are out there in different spaces. And then I have a lot of like mentees that I work with. So I always like to know too, like what's happening with people in my network. Just in case somebody says, hey, I really want to break into this field. Do you know anybody? And trying to make that warm introduction for people.
Oh, such a good mentor, Gabby. Love it.
Well, let's see. Got to get them jobs first.
Okay, that's fair, but your heart is definitely in the right place. So let's dive in. Let's dive into these conversations. So first things first, having a strong online presence. What I'm going to do in this section is go through what I would consider to be the 5 key sections of a LinkedIn profile and give you some tips about each of them. And then I'll pause for a minute to see if anybody has any questions about those before we move on. And I think that the best way to do this is really just to use LinkedIn itself. So Gabby, can you just confirm that you can see my LinkedIn feed?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So when you log into your LinkedIn profile, I think the easiest way to get to your own account, or when you log into your LinkedIn account, the best way to get to your profile is by clicking on me in the top right corner and then clicking view profile. And first things first, where your eye kind of immediately is drawn to is probably the photo, or the photos in this case, because there is a ton of research that has been done that shows that LinkedIn profiles with photos significantly outperform photos without profiles in terms of click rates and many other statistics. So the first key section of that LinkedIn profile is to have a photo. Here you can see my LinkedIn profile and the photo that I chose to use. There really aren't too many rules when it comes to choosing a photo. However, if I was to give you some advice, I would say try to choose a photo that features only you, because it can be a little bit awkward when you're like in a group photo and you like crop everybody else out and just have like, you know, your face in the middle of the circle. So try to have just you in the photo. Make sure that it's relevant in terms of what you're wearing to your industry. So for example, if you are, applying to work as a, data analyst, you might want to think about like, what does a data analyst typically wear to work, and then reflect that in your profile photo. So you might wear a blazer, a button-up shirt, a blouse, something along those lines. Whereas if, might not be as applicable to this group, but if you were applying to be like a teacher, you might be able to dress a little bit more casually. Or if you were applying to work in agriculture, that style might be a little bit different. So in terms of what to wear, just make sure that it aligns with your industry. I get a lot of questions about the header photo or the cover photo. And my best advice for that is to have it be a conversation starter, whatever that might mean to you. So for me, I have a photo of what some of you might recognize as the New York City skyline with taken from Central Park. And that's because I'm originally from right outside the city. So when people see my profile, they often ask me questions like, oh, are you from New York City? Or like, why is New York City your background? And it's a really good way for me to build connections with people. So as long as it makes a statement, that can be really beneficial. And I want to show you one other person's photo just so that you can see a different example. So this is all the examples I'm using today are from people in my personal network. So this is somebody I know named Michaela. Michaela is actually still a student at the university that I'm affiliated with, but I really like her profile because, again, her photo is like just her. It's a nice headshot. It's, I think, very appropriate for her field. And then her background really shows a part of her identity that she wants to showcase. And again, could be a really good conversation starter. So just wanted to show you those 2 examples of what your photo selection might look like. Okay, so then moving on to number 2 of those 5 key sections, that is going to be this line right here below your name, which LinkedIn refers to as your headline. And the key component of your headline is that it's the only piece of information that a potential recruiter or employer or anyone really gets to see before they decide whether or not they want to click on your profile. So for example, if I go up to my search bar and type in Gabby's name, you can see that all I can see about her is that she's a value advisor, SAP, before I decide, like, is Gabby someone that I want to click on? So it's really important because it serves as like a hook for your audience to want to, click on you and read more. So my advice about your headline is to use keywords. First and foremost, keywords are the way to go. And the way to choose those keywords is to think about, if you were a recruiter doing searches, what searches would you do that you'd want your own profile to appear in? So for example, I'm a career coach. And so if somebody's looking for a career coach for something, I want to come up in that search. So I have the phrase career coach here in my headline. I also am really passionate about equity and inclusion. That's part of my current role, my current full-time position. So I have that in here as well. And then one skill set that I'm really proud of that I also want people to know about is my data and analytics. So that's what I have in here as well. Another example, again, this is Hannah. She is somebody who has an MPA, again, somebody that I know. In her headline, she has a lot of healthcare related keywords. So she has healthcare innovation and technology, strategic planning and health operations, project management and telehealth. So when anyone, does a search for any of those keywords, Hannah's profile is going to come up with them. So my, call to action for you is to think about those searches and what you want to appear in, and then make your headline full of keywords that are relevant to that particular industry or search, whatever that may be. The other thing that I wanted to mention about headlines is that you can change them as frequently as you'd like. So if you want to kind of put something now and then you kind of change your mind, you can always do that. There's no reason that you need to feel locked into a certain headline, especially if you change your aspirations or your goals.
Got it.
Well, I hear you, Gabby, but it sounds like you're a little bit choppy. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I think what you were going to say is that we have a question in the chat. So I will go ahead and address that. So the question is, do you think shorter is better there or put as much info as possible? And my answer to that question is actually both. Which might seem counterintuitive, but if I go back to my search bar here where I typed in Gabby's name, you can see that I only get a certain number of characters as a preview before I have to click on Gabby's profile to see her entire, what her entire headline says. So what I would encourage you to do is put the most important information first and make sure that it's visible in that short window. But fill the rest with keywords for sure, because that will benefit you in the recruiter search element of the headline. So I know that is kind of a tough answer, but that's why personally I have equity and inclusion first, because that's kind of the thing that I would consider most important to me. And then I also have all those other keywords following. So great question. Thanks for asking that. Okay, so moving on to number 3 of those 5 key sections. This one is going to be the about section. And to be honest, this is probably the trickiest part of your LinkedIn profile, mainly because it's the part that's the most different from your resume. But it's important. And the main reason that it's important is because this is your chance to introduce yourself to somebody who has never met you before if they come across your profile. Sure, they could scroll through and they could read all of your experiences, your bullet points, everything that you've done. But if you don't give them that more narrative introduction, they might not necessarily know what to pay most attention to, or what your future goals are, or why you might be a good fit for their organization. So putting that information here is key. And so the format that I typically recommend for this section is past, present, future. So tell me a little bit about your past. How did you get interested in the field that you're interested in today? Maybe what are some key experiences that you've had over the course of your upbringing that have led you to make your various career decisions? Things like that. How did you get to where you are today? Present being, what are you currently involved in and what are your current strengths? You want to do this in a way that doesn't repeat what's on the other sections of your profile, which we'll get to in a second, but rather builds on them or explains them in a more narrative way. And then future, what are you looking for? What are your goals? Why might someone want to contact you on LinkedIn? And if you can combine those three things together, that is what really makes an ideal about section, because those are the things that an employer or recruiter is going to want to know pretty immediately when they look at your profile. So you can see here in mine, even though I'm not in the healthcare industry, I have this first paragraph, which kind of covers the past and present tense. Specifically, I have this sentence here about my strengths and list a bunch of different things that I would consider my strengths there. And then I also talk in this paragraph about what my future goals are. So I hope to pursue doctoral education. These are my areas of interest. I recently earned this certification, a few months ago. That was my future plan. And then I also chose to include my contact information down here at the bottom, which is totally optional, but is something that might make it easier for folks to get in touch with you via email if you'd rather that as opposed to LinkedIn messages. So just a suggestion there. And as usual, want to show you another example that is a little bit more health related. So this is Ruby. She is a health risk consultant. And if we take a look at her about section, she starts off by saying that she is a care-driven global health professional. So right there, we know like what her values are and what drives her and why she's in the field that she's in. She talks about some of her experience broadly. So she has project management experience and epidemiological research experience. Then in here, we get to like the present tense, the present piece, so she talks about some of her current strengths as well as her interests. And then this sentence kind of talks about her future goals, where she says, this is what I'm looking to like work towards, and I strive to foster human connection and empowerment. So you can see here how this it's not just a list of her experiences, but it's the key points about her a journey to her current educational position or career position, and what some key takeaways that a recruiter might want to know are featured in a short paragraph. And the last thing I'll mention is similar to the question earlier about the headline, like how long should this be? Not too long, because you want somebody to read it, but just if I refresh Ruby's page here, you'll see that I also had to click on that see more button to read her full about section. So it looks like the first 4 lines are visible before you have to see more. So again, you're going to want to put the most important information in the first 4 lines and then, continue with the rest beyond that. Okay. Then just going quickly through number 4 and 5 of the key sections, because these ones are a little bit shorter and a little bit more straightforward. So after the about section, the next one is your experience. And this one is the one that's most similar to your resume. So if you already have a resume that's developed with explanations of your experiences and things like that, this is going to be really easy because it should be pretty similar to your resume, right? Your LinkedIn and your resume are representing the same human, so they should be pretty similar. So here you're going to want to list your position titles, your dates of employment, your locations of employment. One thing you can also do is hyperlink media to your employment opportunities. So these 2 things for some reason aren't loading right now, but they're 2 different articles about some of the work that I did when I was a career consultant at the Center for Career Development. So if people want to learn more about me, they can go externally and view those different links. And I also have my descriptions here of what I did in my role, so a recruiter can kind of see what my experience looks like if they're looking to get in touch with me. One thing that I really want to emphasize in this section is that experience is used by LinkedIn intentionally as a very broad term. So this section isn't just for like full-time paid experiences. It's for any experience that you think is relevant to your future career goals. So for example, this University of Connecticut experience is where I currently work, and these are my full-time positions. But if I scroll down, this is a volunteer position that I have. It's a remote position, but it's still very relevant to my work. And so I have that emphasized here in my experience section as well. So it's totally up to you to decide like what goes in this experience section. And I would encourage you to choose what is most relevant for your industry. And then last but not least, the fifth of the 5 key sections is your education section. This one, again, is pretty straightforward. Once you decide to add an experience, it will directly ask you for the information to present here. So the school, the degree, any activities you were involved in. Again, you can hyperlink different, links and documents and things like that. You definitely want to include any post-secondary education you've had, whether it be a bachelor's, a certificate, a master's, a doctorate level degree, a specialist degree, anything like that. You can also include like study abroad experiences or high school experiences if you want to, if you think those would be beneficial for people to know, but not required. So that's just something to consider. And then I do want to show quickly some examples of those. So if we take a look at, this is Megan. Megan is an MBA, but works specifically in the healthcare industry as a patient access training specialist. And if we look at Megan's education section, you can see that Megan has featured a bachelor's degree here in allied health sciences, actually a double major in allied health sciences and molecular and cell biology, and then also a master's of business administration in healthcare administration and healthcare data analytics. So this is just a kind of a simple example of what your education section could look like. And then the other example that I have is currently being blocked by my Zoom menu. There we go. So this is Rivali. Rivali is a research product manager at the Center for Surgery and Public Health at Brigham and Women's Hospital in the Boston area. And I really like how Rivali has built out her experience section. So you can see that like she has her position title here, a description of like what the project she's working on in, a link to a presentation that she did about her research, and then the next position below. And it's all built out in a very easily understandable, detailed way. So I really like her profile as an example. So I know that was a ton of information, and probably you have some questions, so feel free to throw those questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Gabby, I'm wondering if you're back with us?
I am back, I hope, at least. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
This is super interesting, at least for me too, just to see examples of, the golden state of what it could be, what your LinkedIn profiles can look like, and to get a feel for the types of different descriptions that exist. We do have one question in the Q&A. It doesn't seem to be related to what we just spoke about, but we can also address this now while people add more questions to the chat. The question here is, how do I set my profile for remote only work? I keep getting recruiters for hybrid or on-site opportunities.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And unfortunately, there isn't like a specific button or setting on LinkedIn that will allow you to do that, because I don't really know why LinkedIn hasn't made this change yet. Feels like they should have during the pandemic. Yeah. But as you can see, like Rivali right here has Greater Boston listed because you have to list a physical location. Like you can't say remote right there. So instead, what I would recommend doing is for that location piece, put wherever you're physically located, Greater Boston, Greater Hartford, New York City, San Francisco, whatever it may be. And then that's where your about section can really come into play. You can put a line in there that says, I am currently seeking remote opportunities or virtual opportunities only. You can decide how, you want to word that exactly to appeal to employers, but that can be an indication to them to essentially like very lightly say, don't reach out to me unless you have a remote opportunity.
So maybe not getting everyone to stop like reaching out if it's not what the right fit is, but hopefully filtering out as many as possible with that.
Yeah.
And we've got another question. And I think this is one that is definitely one we saw come up in a lot of the pre questions, which is, how do you set your profile when you're career transitioning? I don't know if they're referring to maybe making like a pivot role-wise, or but just in general, I think it's a useful question to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say at a high level, my answer is to try to tailor your profile to your target industry as much as possible in each of the sections that we just discussed, except for the picture. That's going to stay the same, really, whichever industry you're working in. But when you think about things like your headline, if I look at what I have right now, mine's one of the things that it says in here is data and analytics enthusiast. That has nothing to do with like my current job title or my current role. It's just something that I'm really passionate about and I want people to know about and I want to come up in searches in. So if I was looking to maybe transition into a product management role in healthcare, I might put aspiring healthcare product manager in my headline, or think about some way to incorporate that target industry. Same thing with your about section. In this section where you talk about your future goals, you want to mention that, you want to say, I'm looking to transition into a research career in pharmaceuticals because my past experience as a nurse has taught me so much about, medications, and I want to be able to develop them, more from the onset. Or, you can kind of write a description of how your past experience is relevant to this new field that you want to try. And then even when it comes to your experience section down below, if you, in your descriptions, don't just focus on like what you did in each experience, but rather how that experience is relevant to the field that you want to transition to, that can be really beneficial. So instead of, as a career consultant, instead of just saying, met one-on-one to do resume critiques, I could say, build strong relationships with clients in order to help them achieve their goals, which is something that, a healthcare professional would have to do. So it's all about thinking like, what are the skills and experiences required in the field that I'm pursuing, and how can I articulate those on my profile? One additional thing that I will mention along those lines is that I only went through 5 key sections, but there are a lot of other sections that you can include on your LinkedIn profile as well. So just to scroll down and show you a couple of those really quickly, there's licenses and certifications if you have any of those, or if the field that you're entering needs any of those, especially if you're in like a tech-based role, that can be really cool. Any volunteering that you've done, if it's relevant, even if it's not paid, like I was mentioning earlier. The skills section can be really beneficial for you to showcase skills that maybe you didn't learn from a past job, but you still have. So thinking about like what skills are required for the field that you're trying to transition into. Recommendations you can get from like your colleagues and other people to support your transition into this new field. Publications is more of like a niche one if you're in a field that has that. Courses that you've taken, whether in school or like outside of school, projects. And then the last section that I think is really like noteworthy is the interest section, which is where you can follow companies, join groups, we'll talk about in a little bit, and also influencers, I think is the term that LinkedIn uses to describe like people that have profiles that you can follow. But the more things that you put in your interest section that are relevant to the field that you're trying to transition into, the better, because then employers are going to see your commitment to that field. So there's a lot of ways that you can do that. And we can also talk in the next section of today's chat about like how to use LinkedIn to make that career transition. But I hope that's helpful for now.
Absolutely. And I've learned that you really like Chipotle.
Funny story, I actually did a case study on them when I was in college. So I learned like so much about their sustainability practices as an organization. And I was like, this is cool. So I followed them.
I love that. And a good note for other people too. You see something that's interesting, follow along. You never know what you'll get.
Exactly. And if I one day decided to apply for a job at Chipotle and they see, oh, look, Lisa is following us on LinkedIn, that can only work in my favor.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so once again, that was a ton of information. I'm hopping back over to the PowerPoint for a second. I do have a slide here that I will share with everyone at the end of the presentation that has kind of the key points that I just went over about each of those 5 key sections. So don't worry about having to memorize all of it. You will have these to refer back to. And you can also always turn to other people in your field and look at their profiles for inspiration. That's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, +1 on that. People who you've also like worked with who've done the same job as you can be a really helpful source.
Absolutely.
Cover photo should be a conversation starter.
Yes. Okay. So if there are no more questions for right now about the profile, I'm going to go ahead and move into our next topic of conversation, which is the research component of LinkedIn. And like I said earlier, I'm going to go through 4 different research strategies with LinkedIn. Happy to answer questions about them, and also any other research features that you know about that you would like to ask about as well. So the first feature that I want to talk about is the people search. And for each of these search methods, I've written down a couple of reasons why you might want to use this particular search feature. So when you're looking at the people search, this is particularly helpful when you are searching for job titles that match your general interests. So let's say you're just generally interested in public health, but you don't know what job title is associated with that. This is a great way to find some examples. You might be curious about which companies hire for a specific job title that you're interested in. You might know your dream job, but not know where to find it. So that's another benefit. You might be interested in collecting a wide variety of examples of how people broke into this field. So let's say you are making a career transition and you want to see how do other people who have experience as patient care coordinators get into healthcare analytics, and this can show you some of that. And then also this can show you second degree connections, which for those of you who are not familiar with that term, it essentially means that you are not directly connected with someone, but you are one step removed from them. So for example, Gabby is my first connection because we are directly connected with each other, but Gabby's boss is my second degree connection because I don't know Gabby's boss, but we both know Gabby. So we're connected in that way. And I'm going to show you an example, but I also have a screenshot in here for you to refer to later. The easiest way to access this is to just go to the main search bar in LinkedIn and type in a keyword and then filter your results to show people. So let's go ahead and look at a quick example. So I will pull LinkedIn back up, and I'm going to go with one of the examples that was mentioned in the chat earlier. I'm going to just type in pharmaceuticals and click enter. And then if I look at the filters here, I'm going to click people as the filter to show me people who have, pharmaceuticals in their profile. And you can see here that this came up with 1,040,000 results, which is a lot of people. So what you could do is literally go through each of these people one by one and read about them. So this first person, Mehak Sharma, is a PharmD, is a global medical affairs fellow at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. If that person sounds interesting, you can click on their profile, you can learn more, etc. You might want to look at Vertex Pharmaceuticals as a company that hires people in this industry, on the side if you want to, etc. You can also kind of scroll down and look for other options. I will say that a lot of the people that are coming up for me are in human resources because that's the field that I'm in, and LinkedIn knows that. And so they give me, relevant suggestions, but your search results will probably look a lot different. But let's go to maybe page 5 and see, let's pick somebody as an example, maybe this person right here. So this person is a senior research scientist at Douglas Pharmaceuticals, which is a company that I've never heard of. So if I click on their profile, I can hopefully scroll down and learn a little bit more about what they do. So we have a little bit of information here. They're a bioanalytical and analytical scientist specifically, and they do have a doctor of, or a PhD. So if you really wanted to be a senior research scientist at a pharmaceutical company, this profile is maybe an indication that you might want to consider pursuing a PhD, because that's what it might take for you to get, move in that direction. Alternatively, you can also maybe take a look at the prior experience that this person had to their current role and see, oh, well, actually, instead of, directly becoming a senior research scientist, this person started as a research assistant and then became just a scientist and then became a senior scientist. So now those are all position titles that you can take to Indeed or another website and look for to find relevant opportunities. So you can see how we just started with the keyword pharmaceuticals, and then we learned all of that information just by looking at one person's profile. And then what you can do is you can go back to your list and click on a bunch of different people who seem interesting and do the same thing, where you find, you look at their profiles and you learn more. If you don't want to go through 1,040,000 people, you can also click on this all filters button and filter it down. So you can maybe look at people just in a certain country. You can look at people just at a specific employer, in a certain industry, etc. So there's a lot of ways to narrow this down so that you can find the people that you're specifically looking for. So to review, this people search feature is really helpful for finding job titles, finding companies that hire in certain industries, finding examples of how people got to where they are today. And then lastly, I didn't mention this second degree connection piece, but if we go back, you can see that at the bottom of all of these listings, it tells me if I have somebody who is a common connection. So if I thought that Nikki C here was someone who I really wanted to connect with, I might be able to ask Robin to introduce us because we have that person as a shared connection. So lots of potential here with the people search. Okay.
Lisa, how close do you need to be to
yes.
this person to reach out to them for this kind of referral?
That is a great question. And I would say that you don't really need to be super close to the person to reach out for a referral. There's a chance that they might say no or like not respond to you if they feel like they don't know you well enough and might not be able to like vouch for you in this sort of setting. But worst case scenario is that they say no. Best case scenario is that they say yes and you get that introduction. So I always recommend going for it. You know, it can't hurt to ask. And then if it doesn't work out, you know, try somebody else, try a different route, and see if you can make something else happen instead.
Awesome.
Yes, and we will talk a little bit about connection requests in a few minutes. So bookmark that, everyone. But moving into the second type of search that I find super helpful is the company search. And this is particularly helpful when you are looking to connect with a recruiter at a specific company, looking to network with employees at a specific company, curious about how exactly a certain company lists its job titles. So are they product managers or healthcare product managers or product owners? Like there's slight variations on different position titles, and you want to make sure you know exactly what that company uses. You can also learn what type of background or experiences a specific company values in who they hire. And also you might be able to, instead of looking for second degree connection, you can look for somebody who was maybe recently hired or recently started a role at that organization to ask them about the like application and interview process. So again, lots of like different uses for this search, but also still really helpful. And for this one, I've used ResMarket as an example for your screenshot here. So all you're gonna wanna do is go to the company page and select people from the submenu. So again, let's go ahead and do an example of that together. So if I go back to LinkedIn and I'm going to pick a company to use as an example, I'm going to do Hartford Healthcare because that is a company that I personally work with very closely here in Connecticut. And if I type in Hartford Healthcare, it comes up, it takes me to their company page. And just like this screenshot, I have this little sub menu right here and I can go ahead and click on people. And Hartford Healthcare is a little bit bigger than ResMarket. So there are just a few more employees, about 4,200. And you'll see here that I can actually filter this set of 4,200 employees to find some of those things that I was looking for. So for example, if I wanted people who were specifically located in like the Boston area, because that's where I was, I could put on that filter. I could also specifically maybe look for people in IT because that's the industry that I want to work in within healthcare. So those are, you know, I'll keep those filters on for now because that brings me all the way down to 3 people. And then if you scroll down, you can see the results of your search. So I can see that these are the 3 people who work in IT in the Boston area at Hartford Healthcare. And then I could once again click on their profiles and learn a little bit more about them. So this is a value-based programs administrator at Hartford Healthcare. This person has a pretty good description of what they do, which is nice. It looks like this was not their first role, after they got their degree. It looks like they had a lot of other positions. So these are some other position titles you might want to consider, or even different companies that you might want to consider. There's actually a lot on this person's profile. And then if we look at their education, looks like they have some international education, which is cool. They do have an MBA from the Darla Moore School of Business, which I am unfamiliar with, but it looks like it's from the University of either South Carolina or Southern California. They both have the same abbreviation, so it's hard to tell. But again, you can learn all about this person and what skills they have and what might allow you to pursue a similar opportunity. So lots of potential here with this little search feature for you to find, to do a deep dive of a particular organization. One other example that I do want to show you on this page is if you're looking for a recruiter. So if you are saying like, I want to work at Hartford Healthcare so bad, and I want to connect with a recruiter at Hartford Healthcare to like set up an interview or, get things going, you can come over to the what they do column and look for human resources. And this will show you that there are 181 people in human resources at Hartford Healthcare. And then again, you can scroll down and try to find the position or the person who is like most applicable to you and like your situation. So some people are sometimes like based in a certain geographic area, or some people focus on like different levels of positions, like entry level versus senior level versus in the middle. So you can find somebody, send them a message. Recruiters are on LinkedIn all of the time. So if you send them a message, it's very likely they're going to read it and respond. So keep that in mind in terms of like a really good way to like spend your time and effort. Okay. I don't see any questions about this particular search feature, so I'm going to jump ahead to the next one because it's actually very similar, and it is the alumni search feature. So instead of using a company as your starting point for this one, you can use a university. So if you are looking to maybe connect with some people who you already have something in common with as like a really good conversation starter, this would be a really good way to do that by looking at your alma mater or multiple alma maters if you went to multiple schools. If you're curious about how other people with like your same degree, same major, same credentials have gotten into a certain field, this is a really great way to find out. And then also, if you want to know, like, do any other people from my school work at Hartford Healthcare? This is another way that you can figure that out too. So again, lots of potential here. And the screenshot you'll notice looks so similar to the company search, where you're going to go to the school page, and then in the submenu, instead of clicking people, you're going to click alumni. So I'm not going to demo this one because it is like exactly the same as the company search, same buttons, same strategy. But I would recommend using this too to see where your school, university, alumni network has gone with their careers, and see if there's anyone you can tap into from that.
Yeah, just to add there, people really do love talking about their schools. So it's always like, oh my God, like, how's it been? What's it like now? It's like a great thing for both parties.
Agreed. Yeah, that reminded me, one other thing that's really cool about this is if there's a school that you want to go to, like let's say you want to get a master's in business, in healthcare analytics, or like a PharmD or something like that, you can go to the page of the school that you want to go to and find alumni of that school. And that can be like another networking strategy for you, to try to ask them about like how they got into that school. What is the application process like? What was their experience like? And things like that. So again, so much potential here. Okay. And then the last research tool that I want to just touch on really quickly is the job search piece. So as I mentioned earlier, there are over 1 million jobs in the healthcare industry that are posted on LinkedIn at any given point in time, and you should take advantage of that. So when you're on LinkedIn, the easiest way to get to the job search is to click the briefcase in the main menu and get started by just typing in a keyword. So in this example here, I typed in public health, and you can see that there were 115,000 results. So not a small number. And then you can scroll through the different postings and click on ones you're interested in. They give you instructions on how to apply, what the qualifications are, etc. So lots to kind of learn from this experience as well. One thing that I would really draw your attention to is in the job description, there's usually going to be something that's called like qualifications or knowledge, skills, and abilities or requirements. And when I know a lot of the questions that we got prior to the event are like, how do I find out what a recruiter is looking for? That's how. The qualifications is almost like a cheat sheet saying like, these are the things that we're looking for in an ideal applicant. So if you can emphasize those in your application, that is what's going to be your key to that opportunity. So keep that in mind as you're using the job search feature on LinkedIn. And just a couple of quick notes about the job search feature before we move on to this section is you want to make sure that you are still putting like all the time and effort that you would put into any other application into applications on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn does have a feature called Easy Apply that I don't recommend using because it can also be seen as like the easy way out of like putting together a tailored application. So make sure that you are emphasizing quality over quantity and really putting your all into your applications, just like you would if you were applying in a more traditional, like physically handing in paper or like going through a company website or something like that.
I have a question in the audience. How best to narrow down job search?
That is a really good question. If I go back to the job search screenshot here, you can see that like right below the search bar where it says public health, there's all those like bubbles. And just how we were filtering the people search earlier, you could also filter the job search. So if you want to look at jobs that are only remote, like the question that was asked earlier, or maybe are only in a certain type of company or are entry level specifically, you know, those are some of the filters that you can apply here. You can apply as many filters as you want. I typically recommend like applying as many filters as you're interested in first to see like maybe that only comes up with 3 jobs, but those might be like your 3 ideal jobs. And then you can start removing the filters one by one based on like your priority of each of them to add more and more jobs to your consideration. I would also just remind you that new jobs are posted every month, every week, every day, honestly. So the more you check LinkedIn, the less likely you are to miss something that might really match your specific criteria. You can also, there's this little blue toggle switch right in the kind of the middle of the screen that says set alert. So if you really want like public health jobs in the US, you can set an alert so that LinkedIn sends you an email whenever like a group of new jobs in that search are posted. So that can be a really helpful way to like narrow down, you know, the overwhelming job search as well.
We've got another question too about cover letters. Curious if you think, especially within the healthcare industry, if you think they're worth the time or they're more of that waste of time.
I always think they're worth it. And I would say my main reasoning for that is because if you and somebody else are like the final 2 candidates for a position and they submitted a cover letter and you didn't, it's going to lean in their direction because the applicant, like review committee has gotten to know them in a way that they haven't gotten to know you because of the fact that they've submitted a cover letter. You're absolutely right that some people perceive them as a waste of time. Some people don't read them, even if you submit them. But I think it's always better to be safe than sorry and include one. especially for jobs that you are very interested in. You don't necessarily have to include one for every single job out there, but if you are like, this is the job for me, you're going to want to put everything you can into that application.
No, that makes sense. I've also heard before that if you're applying for like a really, really big company, they're mostly going to look at your resume and get more of the cover letter information during the interview phase. So size might be something to consider as well. So maybe if it's a more smaller boutique thing, or I don't know, too, for maybe more like, so you're saying for healthcare positions themselves, they're typically helpful.
Yeah, I do think so, especially if you're trying to make a career change. Actually, that's one of the places where a cover letter can be like especially helpful, because it allows you to explain your career change essentially in a way that your resume doesn't really. So, you know, just keep that in mind too. Okay, so we are quickly approaching 9:30/6:30/ 30, depending on where you're located. So I'm going to go and click through this last section of slides about building and keeping track of your network, just to give you this information. And once again, I will give you the slides at the end of the presentation, so you'll have them to refer back to. But one thing I want to chat about really quickly is sending connection requests. And the reason is because there are a couple of ways to do it on LinkedIn, but there is definitely a better way. And that way is by going to a person's profile and clicking on the connect button. You can see that the connect button appears in different places in different people's profiles based on how you're connected with them. So on the right-hand side, you can see Danielle's profile, which is someone who I have a lot of mutual connections with. The blue connect button is like right front and center. But with Colin, who I just met through working on this presentation with and don't have any connections in common, I had to click on more, and then the connect button appears on Colin's profile. So you want to find the connect button on each person's profile. And the reason this is the best way is because once you click that connect button, a little pop-up will appear asking you if you want to add a note to your connection request. And the answer should always be yes. Because if you think about it, if I got a request from a random person and there was no context and I didn't know them and I had never met them before, how likely am I to accept that request? Versus if I got a request from someone that said, you know, hey, Lisa, I was at your LinkedIn workshop and I would love to ask you some more questions about my LinkedIn profile. I am so much more likely to accept that request. So if you can put in there like how you found the person and why you're reaching out, that is going to increase the likelihood of them responding significantly. So definitely go ahead and do that. And last note about this is if you're newer to LinkedIn, I always recommend starting out connecting with people who you already know. There's no reason to like dive into the scary world of networking right away, right off the bat, but build up your connections first, because that way, if I were to connect with Danielle and she sees that we know 8 of the same people, again, she's more likely to accept my request maybe than Colin, who's like, who's Lisa? We have no connections in common. So the more you build up your network, the easier it is to expand outside of your network, if that makes sense.
Uh-oh, Colin, this means that we're not connected either.
It does.
All right, connect with me.
Yeah.
Make sure to include a note.
I'll include a note. Hi, Colin, we were on the same webinar today.
Yes.
Exactly. All right. The next way to connect with folks who are like in your industry or share your interests are through groups on LinkedIn. And what I've done is I've screenshotted a number of example groups based on some of the interests that you all shared in your pre-session registration form. So what is a group? Essentially, it's a section of LinkedIn that is private and is only accessible to the people who are part of that group. So on LinkedIn, you have like your news feed and your homepage, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But this feature is like a separate chat string only for people who are a part of the group. So for example, the first group listed here on the slide, it's people who are in healthcare analytics and informatics and people who are interested in those fields only to talk about those industries. So if you are part of a certain industry or looking to break into a certain industry, joining a group that's part of that can be really helpful. And groups get so specific. Like there are groups about pretty much anything you can think of. I think the ones that I chose on the slide here are some of like the larger ones and the broader ones to try to cover like a lot of the interests that were shared for today's presentation. So we have like product management, pharma and biotech, healthcare management, tech jobs, recruiting, billing and coding, etc. But if I were to type in like product managers in women product managers in Connecticut, there's probably a group for that too. So search for groups based on your career interests, your identities that you hold, and your geographic areas, because those are the things that are really commonly reflected in groups. And then try to be an active member. The more active you are, the more you're going to get out of being a part of that group.
It also helps for connection requests, because if you're in the same group, I think it's a little bit easier to connect with people.
That is very true. And taking that even one step further, if you're not connected with someone on LinkedIn, you can't send them a direct message on LinkedIn. But if you are part of a group that they're a part of, you can send them a direct message, even if you're not connected to them. So lots of benefits to joining groups. Okay, and then the last topic is your homepage. And there are really like two components to your homepage. One is interacting with others, and I screenshotted the little menu that you have here in terms of your options. And I just want to kind of emphasize that you should do all of these things, not just liking people's posts, because liking, or there's all those different emojis that you can click on, is very passive. It takes you like literally 1 second to interact with someone in that way, and they might see like, oh, Gabby liked my post, cool, but they're probably not going to remember that down the line. So I highly recommend also commenting as a form of active engagement and sharing like your thoughts or your congratulations or your perspective, sharing something to your own feed and, adding your own take on it as a comment or a post itself. And then sending is where if you see a post that you think would be relevant to like one person in your network, you can send that post to them directly and engage with them in a one-on-one setting. So lots of potential here in terms of ways to engage. And again, a variety of these options is better than just liking posts, because I know a lot of people default to that because it's the easiest option. But if you're looking to get the most out of LinkedIn, a combination is best. Excuse me. And then the last piece of your homepage is posting your own content, which is a tricky part of LinkedIn. And I would just kind of summarize this slide by saying there's no ideal post frequency. So it's not like you need to post once a month or once a week or whatever. But if you have like a goal to be like active on LinkedIn, like maybe you're looking for a job or you're looking to network, you should post more regularly, versus if you're just like not actively searching for something, you don't necessarily have to be quite as active. So keep that in mind. And then if you're looking for some ideas on like what to post, I have some go-to content ideas listed here for you of things that you might spark ideas for posts for you. So once again, that is a ton of information. And I definitely want to pause one last time for Q&A to see if anybody has any questions about anything that was shared, or any parts of LinkedIn that I did not touch on.
And also, I'm going to be putting the survey in the chat, so please do fill it out. It helps us make these events more tailored to you, more specific to your interests, and also helps us understand what you learned. We also have the discount code in the survey, so you'll be able to bookmark that, as well as a bunch of other resources. We have another LinkedIn event coming up in June, so you'll be able to sign up for that as well. We have the link in there. Awesome. And yeah, please submit your questions. And Lisa, I don't know if you saw, so go ahead.
Go ahead.
Colin posted an interesting link in here too of like a LinkedIn score. So you can, I guess, answer that first question you had at the beginning of your LinkedIn competency via LinkedIn metric.
Yeah, there you go. I'm vaguely familiar with this tool. I haven't used it a ton, but I think it is really helpful to add like a comparative data point to kind of assess your rank. So thanks, Colin, for sharing that. Also, while folks are thinking of any other questions, I know that one other question we had in the pre-session survey was about how to kind of share personal information on LinkedIn. And that's a tough one. It is a really tough question because I think LinkedIn is viewed primarily as a professional social media platform and really should be like focused on your professional presence. But I think there's absolutely some potential to include personal information as well. I think that the two easiest places to do that are in your cover photo. So just like we were talking about earlier, like mine's of New York, the Michaela, the other example that we looked at was like the pride flag with also the Black Lives Matter fist. So if you want to share like some things that you're passionate about or that are personal to you, that's a really good way to do it in that photo. And then the second thing is the about section. That about section is so versatile in really explaining to an employer who you are and what like the most important components of you are. So if you can craft that about section in a way that emphasizes your personal and professional priorities, that can be really helpful for employers to know. Your about section will likely be more than a one draft type of thing. You'll probably write it, sleep on it, rewrite it, sleep on it, maybe change it every month or so, but that's totally fine. That's the benefit of LinkedIn, is that you can change it anytime you want.
Exactly. All right. More questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat. Again, please fill out the feedback survey. It has the link to the discount code as well. So if you do want 10% off that session with an advisor from the healthcare industry, you could sign up for that. I'll post that link in here as well. And back to you, Lisa.
Thanks. Yeah. So while everyone is filling out the feedback survey and really thinking about like what you're taking away from today's presentation, my sort of closing call to action for all of you is to set some goals. Write down 2 goals for how you would like to use LinkedIn moving forward based on what you learned today. Those goals could be based on your profile and like updating your profile. It could be based on more of like the research component of LinkedIn or maybe the networking piece of it. I know we talked about all 3 of those components. So whatever kind of most resonates with you, feel free to jot those down as your goals. And if anyone would like to share their goals in the chat, happy to take a look at those, but also know that this can be a very personal thing, so no pressure to share if you're not interested.
I can also share mine while people are going. I know I personally have some things to work on. I think I really like your framework for the about me section of the past, present, future. So I think that I might try to update my about section and then also find some more groups to join.
Love that, Gabby.
I also connect with Colin, but yeah, so that's a third goal, I guess.
That's true. Me too, probably. That could be my goal.
Cool.
All right. And I also just put the link to the presentation in the chat. So if you want to bookmark that and refer back to it afterwards, you're welcome to do that. This will never disappear. So you can always have this content to refer back to. And if anybody has any questions or further, wants to do LinkedIn review on your like individual specific profile, I hope that you decide to sign up for a LinkedIn review session.